Franchesca.
I'm Nicole.
And we're going to be doing our video today on tissue talk, pretty much. We're going to be talking about tissue culturing and the whole stir about in the pot on the juice about it, pretty much. I mean, there's been a lot of talk and there's been a lot of rumor and confusion about it, and a lot of people misunderstand.
We're totally not editing this. Just so you know, all of our videos, this is just us talking. So I'm going to put my phone on silent. Is your phone on silent? Yes.
I think so. I don't know.
Sorry, Mom.
Actually, I should have charged it. That's okay. But really, we're gonna be going over like all the misunderstood rumors about tissue culture. Not saying that it's so much of a positive thing, but also not saying it's so much of a negative thing as well. So I don't know.
And again, with our background, like Fran has a lot of experience working from the nursery side of things. And for me, I've always been a grower. We're both horticulture students, and we've done a lot of, learning for this past year, just in general on the horticulture side, which tissue culture is a big part of that because it's being able to mass produce plants. So when you hear tissue culture, there's two reasons that people do it. They want to create new cultivars, like I'll just throw it out there, the Thai constellation is a result of tissue culturing. Or they want to mass produce for retail. And that's that's the two reasons people tissue culture. There's two sides of that equation, and it's almost like GMO foods in a way. I think that from my perspective, if there was more, transparency on which plants were tissue cultured and which weren't, and we're giving the buyer more of an option of which one they're buying and which one, is like the, I guess, genetically unique versus being just the clone. Although, in your experience, what do you feel like the difference between tissue culture and just propagating, like taking a cutting, is?
Personally, like from a grower side, and not so much as like a mass producer side, from just as a hobbyist and growing and propagating and pretty much spreading love, I have found that tissue culture plants, they have a bigger problem really acclimating towards the environment and the new environment. They are set and grown and developed pretty much in very pristine, perfect lab environments. And once they transition from the lab environments, they're put in quote-unquote perfect environments into greenhouses where they're pampered pretty much. Like most of the time when they are going from a nursery to a home setting or a big nursery to a smaller nursery, like none of them are getting acclimated, and that's the biggest thing that gets to us. And with propagating them, I have noticed that if you're lucky enough to get it to root before it rots, it's gonna take forever. It takes 2 to 3 times longer while you're propagating a tissue culture versus a true clone or a true, what's the word I'm looking for, baby off of a mother plant, like
an offset.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I've personally realized, because I've gone out and I've reached for big mother plants to take cuttings off of, and the one thing that I've noticed, the first thing that I noticed was the Cebu Blue. That was, I got one and I was able to get my hands on a true clone versus like a tissue culture, and you can just, based off the look of the leaf, you can tell that they look the same from a distance, but they have two completely appearances when you really finally look at them. I see the Cebu Blue, the true clone version of it, carries more of that blue silver tone to it, where the tissue culture clone, that has more shine to the leaf, and it has more of a green blue, like an aqua blue kind of color, versus that silver blue color that's actually known for. And like I said, like I've been training them up poles, climbing them, aiming for that fenestration. I've noticed that the tissue cultured ones, the leaves stay small. They don't get that, if they do get bigger, they slowly get bigger versus the Cebu Blues that are cloned. Those things, those will fenestrate within. Once you get it to climb, it's already fenestrated. And it's fun and it's cheaper, and I understand how you can mass produce them so much quicker, and it's cheaper to the local community. And everybody, if you're just collecting plants as a hobby, you're gonna look at this cheaper price and look at the two of the same plants and not know the difference, you know? And that's where the average person is getting got.
I know, and it's just like with the Thai constellation. So like you brought up the Cebu Blue, which she gave me my Cebu Blue, by the way, and it's the good one. But you know, with my experience, so like the Thai constellations, I did a lot of research on them, and with them being an original tissue culture, I thought it was fascinating because that was my first experience with the tropical side. Now, in the agricultural side, because I do a lot of vegetable plants, I do a lot of everything outside, and you know, a bunch of stuff inside. But my first experience with tissue culture was actually vegetative outside with, you know, different strains of like even kale, like because they can tissue culture that, find new varieties, new cultivars that have more disease resistance, yada 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 yada. It's for that purpose that they're doing it, is for more disease resistance, to be more heat tolerant, shade tolerant, those sorts of things. But with some of the tropicals, it seems like it's just to mass produce. Once they get this new cultivar and they think that, oh, this is great, like the Thai constellation, you get some people who they'll take cuttings off of the original tissue culture, and then those cuttings, because it's stabilized, then, because like you said, your point made with, they're actually acclimated, and then they're grown, and then they take cuttings off of that, and then those cuttings go into our homes, and they seem to be stable and they're good. But I've noticed with these new tissue cultures coming out, where they did a tissue culture to get a cultivar, and then they tissue cultured the tissue culture, and then that's when you get like all of these weird and funky looking, you know, plants, or, you know, like, you know, my Thai is way too big, so when we go to a friend's house, we'll have to show her, because she has one of the small, she has a bigger one, but she also has a smaller one. Has the big segmentation. I think they even come with a new name, like they're calling it the caramel one, if it has like the huge yellow segmentation. But that was the original Thai constellation. So now they have to come up with a name for that, because the new tissue cultures coming out just have the speckles, which is the actual constellation part of it, which is the star speckles, because they don't even have that segmentation. So it's like they're creating something to try to replicate something, but then they're making something new that's not even what people were wanting. And then they're having issues with like burning with fertilizer. We won't say the name for legal reasons, but you know, all these other issues that people are having. And that's the dark side of tissue culture. It's like
the advantage that people are taking to achieve the purpose of what really tissue culture was originally made for, you know, like people, and of course, I mean, there's always the dirty side of business where people are going to take, if they see the opportunity, they're going to take it. They're going to run a mile with it, you know, and I understand and I respect that, but there's also morality, you know, like, especially, and I don't know if it's because of where we grew up here in a small town, is that like small businesses support small businesses. You don't, it's different from when you're up in the city where every man is for himself. Like here, it's a true community. Like we kumbaya, hold hands in circles and stuff. Like we all support each other. And
even if we talk behind each other's back sometimes.
Yeah, and the crucial part about it is that like you can't go, and I mean, we're from North Carolina, and you can't go up to even the capital of our small state. Like you get a completely different vibe there than you do from our small town that we are, and our community towns that are around us. Like we are all a big community, and like I said, we all like sit here and hold hands, but we all support each other, and that's the main thing with business, and that a lot of these big businesses get a little too gassed up in a way to where they get so power hungry and money hungry that they're quick, and they don't really care about screwing somebody over or all of their customers over producing these tissue culture plants, and knowing that they're only literally setting a date on them to where they can only be in stock for a month before they have a turnaround rate. And
Turnaround meaning they're gonna die.
yeah, no, yeah, turn around in a negative way.
And that's the interesting thing, because, you know, at the end of the day, it is a business, and we are in horticulture. We do want to be able to find a way to make money off of plants. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like the ethical side of it, the ethical side behind it. And there's a lot of hobbyists who love the tissue culture. I don't have the patience for it. I do know how to do it, but messing with agar and the sterilization process, and more power to the people who are hobbyists and who love doing it, or who do this for the purpose of finding new cultivars. I think that's fascinating. We're talking about the mass production of tissue cultured plants for the purpose of retail sale, that are just failing. And they really do, because you reach a limit where you are, you know, when you replicate DNA over and over and over and over and over, you start to have mutations, you start to have issues, you know, whereas before you had the DNA resistance with the original tissue culture. The more you move away from that, because every single time you tissue culture, there's opportunity for mutation. There's opportunity for different things to happen to the genetic makeup of that individual. And then you take that and then you replicate 1,000 off of that, and then you're just spreading that issue.
Yeah, instead of, I mean, you're mutating it in a way, but the mutation is by dilution.
Yeah.
You know, like you're sitting there and you're adding water to every single time you turn around. You either tissue culture or you mass produce this plant off of its children and its grandchildren. Like, each time you turn around and tissue culture this one plant that's already been tissue cultured, you're literally watering it down. Therefore, that's where the problem occurs, because each time that they turn it, and each time that they do a new crop off of their new mother plants, and say they have the one that did the best, of course, this is how they base their new mother plants off of, is by performance. They're gonna take that mother plant that is already, like you said, has already been tissue cultured, and it amazes me, because I've seen, and don't get me wrong, like Nicole and I, we'll go to these places that sell these mass-produced plants, and we'll try them out. I've personally noticed where one batch comes in and it's horrible, you know, like those plants that's slowly dying off within the month. And then I've also had other batches to where I've had them for years and going on, you know, like, and knowing that this plant has been tissue cultured, but it's still doing a better performance than half of the stuff that I've gotten. And it's because of that dilution. It's because of the crops and different crops and how much they are diluted, you know? And you don't really think about it until you think about it. And that's the amazing part about it, because not a lot of people are thinking about it.
Yeah, and like I said, I just wish that there was more, you know, especially like I said with the food. And one of the reasons why, you know, I actually got into a lot of the hardcore gardening was because I wanted to grow my own food, because of the whole GMO and chemicals and all that. I just think, for transparency's sake, I think a lot of the tissue culture debate would be almost null and void if there is that transparency and labeling, like, this is a product of tissue culturing. You know what I mean? That would really help. But then again, a part of me feels like the reason they're not doing that is because then people would naturally not buy the tissue culture, and then that would be because it is genetically modified.
Yeah.
So, because tissue culturing, it's not. In its advent, in its beginning stages, you are genetically modifying. You're actually deliberately choosing different traits, and you're doing it at a, you know, cellular level. So that's what it is. And we're not going to get into the whole scientific technical side. There's a lot of videos out there that do discuss exactly what tissue culturing is and how it's done. So we're not going to get into that.
They can explain that.
We're just saying our experience with plant performance of tissue culturing. And for us, the ethical and, you know, the ethical side of it would be the easy solution would be to label plants if they're tissue cultured or a result of tissue culturing, to just label it. And then after that, there would be no issue. There really wouldn't. But I don't think people will do that because nobody's going to buy the tissue culture if they have the option otherwise.
I mean, the same as like, and I mean, this is kind of same of topic, but it's kind of off topic, is with the pink Congo.
Yeah.
The whole thing is with the pink Congo is where people, this plant was mass produced, but not injected, but introduced to different chemicals that it was taken in and basically fertilized with and nurtured with to promote that full pink leaf. Mm-hmm. And then when people found out that, oh, once I take this plant home, it's going to go back to green. It's not going to truly keep its pink color. People found out the truth. People found out that, oh, this is not really what it says it is. It's not. I mean, the Pink Princess is kind of the same way, where you can introduce this pink and you can gain this pink, but it takes a lot of maintenance in order to keep that pink.
But that's how a lot of variegation is, even in the natural world with like even albos, like anything, if you don't give it its right conditions, it could revert or it responds to conditions. And we'll do a video later on about how you can really kind of keep that variegation if that's what you want.
And that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing with the Thai constellation. That's the one reason why it's become such a rise, is because the albo was a natural genetic mutation. Like that naturally occurred. It naturally was lacking that chlorophyll. And to where the Thai constellation, given it carrying not that true white, but that creamy kind of variegation, you can tell, but it was created in a tissue cultured lab. Mm-hmm. It was the first Thai constellation to ever was genetically modified. Mm-hmm. And that with that purpose, with outdoor plants, like it being genetically modified to where it's more resistant to disease, this one was more resistant to reverting. Mm-hmm. Similar to the Pink Princess, is to where like it might go back to all green, but you can always introduce that variegation back into it. Mm-hmm. Like Thai constellations were supposed to never ever revert truly. It's supposed to always carry that variegation somehow. But with the consequences of it, I've always noticed is that the Thai, I mean, don't get me wrong, an albo will rot on you in a heartbeat, but a Thai will rot on you in half a heartbeat. And that's the consequences of it, because you know it's never going to revert.
It's internodes were bred to be so
it gives me a heart attack every single time I cut it. I swear.
Because there's like no room for error on a Thai.
It's so frustrating. I swear I have to approach it sideways. Like literally, I'm just like, all right.
Like 10 candles and say 3 prayers and then cut. So
yes.
But so we're not saying that tissue culturing is bad at all. We're saying it is what it is. Okay. There are good reasons to perform tissue culturing. A lot of hobbyists out there. I mean, I think it's just fantastic that people do this as a hobby, because but then people look at stuff that I do and they think that I'm crazy. But it's when you get into the whole mass reproduction and the lack of transparency and labeling with what's tissue culture and what isn't, that I think puts things in the muddy water. And then that's where we start to have issues. And, again, coming from both of our experiences, tissue culturing's been around for a long time. Cloning, which via cutting, it's been around since there's been trees and people figured out they could cut the top off and put it in the ground. So, whatever. For all we know, apes in the jungle were cutting banana trees and sticking the top in the ground. I don't know. They can use tools.
You never know.
I
like to think of it as the witches and the warlocks, but we have different mindsets.
Yeah, it's just different. Tissue culturing it's so out there in the realm of possibilities and what people can use it for, that it's fantastic. And again, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just sort of in the eye of the beholder, and again, in what the intention behind it is, and in our opinion,
And I mean, it's not new. but it's a lot newer than cloning. And it's something that's really misunderstood because it's something new that's been brought to the surface. And I mean, it's been around for, honestly, I personally don't know how long it's been around for, but I know that it's been around a lot longer than we know of.
Honestly, if you want to really consider it, I consider it's been around since penicillin. Because honestly, penicillin, the way that they created it in the dish and the agar and then all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah, yes.
And they started with, trying to recreate but it really moved into the horticultural realm, I believe is in the last 2 decades, in the big way.
I think it was back like after that whole 70s kick with the whole houseplants, and they saw that there truly was a market there. That's when, because that's probably
I'm gonna Google it right now while you keep talking.
That's probably like the latest of stories and things, because it was originally introduced, like, I believe in the outdoor realm, to genetically modify the daylily, perhaps the hemerocallis, like that one.
Mm-hmm.
That one was one of the first genetically modified plants back in the day because of how prone to rust it was, and they were trying to modify it to where it didn't react to rust. And now they have cultivars to where they are all, like, any newer cultivar you have has that genetic modification to it, because of how sensitive they were. And nowadays, like, unless you go into a garden that was from like truly from like the 70s or the 80s, like, you're not gonna find a true clone of a hemerocallis. Like, you're not probably most of the time.
Okay, so off of science.org, tissue culture has been around since Gottlieb Haberland, an Austrian botanist, discovered the potential of a single cell to produce a plantlet, or the totipotentiality, I think I said that right, of a cell in 1902.
Oh, wow.
And then research off of that came through, and then the actual propagation of micropropagation is what they used to call tissue culturing, has been around since the 1950s, which was actually first utilized to produce orchids, which makes sense because orchids
are a pain in the butt to pollinize.
Although, I grew some orchids from seed. I'm so proud of that. But, so it has been around since like the 1950s, but it started with
close.
orchids.
We were about 2 decades off, but we were close.
But it didn't start to really ramp up until the 1970s, and that was with the houseplant craze, because they were doing it before, but it was low-key, like, for vegetables.
More on the outside.
And things like that. From the 1950s on, it was orchids and vegetables, and, agricultural products trying to get the disease resistance. Mm-hmm. Some flowers, like, outside with the rust and mildew, powdery mildew and all that. And then in the 1970s, it really kicked off with not just disease resistance, but in actual reproduction. Mm-hmm. And actually getting more plants to buff out plants. Yeah.
Speed of manufacturing.
Yeah, and then it really took off. Honestly, tissue culturing, from what that said, which was the science.org, and all the research that we have done, really since kind of like 2015, is when a lot of the tissue culturing really took off for like the big box stores. And people just weren't even aware of what was going on, and tissue culture has really only hit like the household in terms of being like common knowledge. Even though people might not know what tissue culturing is specifically, they've heard of it, especially if you're buying houseplants. And that's really only been like the past 2 or 3 years that people have even been talking about tissue culture.
Because like I said, I mean, like, I grew up growing indoors, because that's, with my mother being from Japan, we've always done bonsais, and we've always had that kind of natural culture to us, and it's never been brought to the table that, like, oh, beware of this plant because it could be genetically modified, like that. Growing up, that was never a problem. That was never an issue. Gardening, indoor or outdoor, that's never been an issue. But now, I'm really dipping my toes in the water, and I'm pretty much knee deep. Like, it has become a problem to me because, something that I get that's tissue cultured, it's going to take me longer to propagate. It's going to take me longer to produce, because I'm not we're not one to tissue culture, so we're not one to know, like, if we're going to mass produce, we're going to mass produce it in the right ways, knowing that it's sturdy, knowing that it's acclimated, knowing that it's gonna live when you bring it into your home or to your home in general, you know? Like that's our goal here, is to avoid undercutting and just being sneaky.
Well, I mean, and that's like, you know, for me, I'm a plant purist, and, you know, I have some tissue cultured plants because I didn't know they were tissue cultured. I couldn't guess they were tissue cultured, but if you buy from a big box store, 9 times out of 10, you've got something that's tissue cultured.
Yeah.
Now, or its origination was a tissue culture, because if you watch some of these stores, we're not gonna throw names out because we're not trying to get in trouble, but some of these big box stores, they'll tissue culture, get the mother plants, and then prop off those mother plants. Now again, Thai constellation and some other plants, you know, that's kind of how they started off. But for me, if you are selling something as something, I want the original. Okay, so I want a golden pothos. I want the golden pothos. I don't want something that was tissue cultured from a golden pothos so they could get 1 million golden pothos to sell. I mean, I know that's oversimplifying the matter, but I want the actual golden pothos. There is a golden pothos. A Thai constellation being a tissue culture, it is a Thai constellation. There is no other Thai constellation except for what had the origination as a tissue culture. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, a lot of these things, I want what actually was the original. You know, I want the one that they found growing in the wild and then cultivated. You know, yes, you can do selective breeding, but breeding from seed, it increases genetic diversity, increases, you know, in most cases, it makes it more hardy, more sturdy, you know, a lot of really good traits that you want to have in your plants indoors and out, and that's what I want. I don't want a faux plant. That to me, a tissue culture of something that actually exists, it's a faux plant.
Unfortunately, like, when microcloning was like a thing and it first started developing, like that was the idea, that was the goal, is to make things hardier, sturdier. That was the end result, is to make it more repellent and just resistant to a lot of other things. And as people, like I said, people started getting greedy and people started getting like money hungry and power thrived, like they just started developing to where that passion just stopped, and they just knew that the basis of it, and they stopped putting the effort into trying to make them more prone to things and just producing it and getting it out there.
I'm just gonna throw something out there. I'm just gonna say, I don't know if it's only the videos I'm watching, and again, I'm not trying to get in trouble, I'm not gonna name names, I'm not gonna point fingers. I'm just gonna say that, I mean, most of the people in the community that I interact with, it's very rarely men. I'm not saying that men don't buy plants. A lot of men buy plants. But most of the people who are talking about the benefits and how great tissue culturing is to mass produce all these plants are all men. Like, I don't know if it's just my jadedness, but I never see women talking about, oh, it's so great that I like mass clone produced all these plants.
Other than the one.
Okay.
Other than the one.
The one. And again, we can't use names, but I'm just saying. And you know, it's so weird. I don't know if it's just the aggressive, like, bow, 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 I'm going to be the dude who gets, like, 1 million of them out. It's like the dude who wants to go have 30 kids and not take care of any of them.
Well, it's more,
like,
it's more of the, look at what I have versus how much I really care for it, you know? Like,
it's like the guy who drives a Ferrari, and it's like, dude, what are you hiding? Because it's like, what's your problem, you know?
Or the guy that's got the big company that has everything to show for, but treats his employees like crap, you know?
Exactly. Like, the people who are doing this, they have the capability to mass produce the plants the right way, but to shave a few dollars and to undercut everybody else,
yeah, like
they're going the tissue culture road. So don't tell me that it's because you love plants. It's not because you love plants. Like, I'm not even throwing shade. I'm like throwing the match and I'm setting the bonfire. Like, it's not because you like plants that you're mass producing tissue culturing.
It might have started out that way. It might have, your passion might have led you to this point, but your greed is, the way that I see it is that your greed has gotten to a point where it's overpowering your passion, and you still fall back on your passion being your default and your excuse on why you are comfortable doing this.
It's just like nukes. It's just like nukes. And I know it's like the weirdest
Yeah.
analogy ever, but it is. It's like, why does the United States, why do we need to have like 1,000 nuclear warheads when 2 would destroy the Earth? Well, because if we don't have them, somebody else will.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if we don't mass produce by tissue culture and undercut everybody else, then somebody else will.
Yeah.
Like, dude, like, at what point did people just like stop the insanity? You know, like, I just don't understand.
That's where, but that comes into our greed where we all just want world peace. Oh, God forbid.
I just want a plant that's not going to die once I bring it home. Like, that'd be nice. And, you know, and again, in a lot of ways, I feel like the people who are the hobbyists and who do the tissue culturing as like means of finding, you know, different disease resistance, or just to find like a plant that has a pink stem where it only had a black stem, you know, those kinds of things. In a way, I feel like it's a big disservice to them, because they're the ones that are doing it for the right reasons, like trying to find the new cultivar, trying to find the disease resistance, but because they're being lumped in with the big box stores who are doing all this massive, it's like they're getting a bad name. And so I just want to, again, clarify, the people who are the hobbyists, or even the scientists in the labs who are doing this, just to do it for the good reasons, I congratulate you. I thank you. You know, we've benefited from, you know, your guys' hard work. It's the people who take what you do and then just stick a great big old dollar sign on it and then cash all kinds of checks and then send out plants that are going to die in somebody's home. You guys are the ones that are shame on you.
Yeah.
But that's my thoughts on tissue culturing. I know this went a lot longer than we were expecting.
There's our spiel on tissue culturing.
But this is the way, you know, I mean, just as a side, as, you know, our videos, and again, we do have, as a disclaimer, we do have a plant shop that we have on Etsy called Practically Plants. We do sell plants. If we are aware anything is tissue cultured, which nothing that I'm aware that we have is tissue cultured, we would state it in the description. But everything that we have, we take care of in our homes. Everything's acclimated, and we do practice what we preach. And our videos, we're not going to edit them out. We're not going to anything. We're just talking and sharing and just honestly trying to be real. This isn't about, you know, how well can I edit a video. This is us just being honest with our conversation. And like even my mom calling, which I have to call her back after the video. So
it's like a TED Talk pretty much.
Yeah, because it's just honestly, you know, it's like being drunk. Like when you're talking and you're literally just talking, the stuff that comes out, it's really more honest and real.
Yeah.
Something that's been highly edited, and then you have like 10 wardrobe changes in the middle. But so I'm Nicole.
I'm Franchesca.
Like and subscribe if you want to get some more content from us. Eventually we'll go to some other areas. Right now we're just kind of putting out videos that we've been really wanting to talk about for right now. But thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.